Hi, I'm Josh.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to bonus content, where we'll be discussing the Lost 20 Star Wars video games. My 20 favorite Star Wars video games. Today we're on number 6, Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast.
All right. Well, let's get started then. How about you tell us about the villain?
I can do I can do better than that. I could tell you the whole story. Uh, so basically, in Jedi Outcast, it's the third game in the Dark Forces series. Except this time, instead of going with Star Wars Dark Forces as the title, they went with Jedi Knight as the title. Basically, in this one, the title crawl goes through your previous adventures. You defeated Jarek at the Valley of the Jedi. Then you fell to the dark side in Dromund Kaas. And now you've gone from being a Jedi to going back to being a mercenary because you feel sad and guilty about the fact that you fell to the dark side of the Force. Also, now you want nothing to do with the Force. So, you start your mission investigating a abandoned Imperial outpost on the planet Kejim by order of Mon Mothma, who intercepted a transmission talking about Valley of the Jedi and Reborn. So, you, Kyle Katarn, and your partner, Jan, investigate the Imperial outpost on Kejim and find out that this abandoned outpost isn't so abandoned after all. And worse off is, the Imperial Remnant is doing experiments on kyber crystals. So, you bring that information back to Mon Mothma, who tells you that she has heard something similar happening on planet Artus Prime, where the Imperial Remnant is mining kyber crystals and experimenting on local colonists on Artus Prime. Basically, it was some sick Imperial Remnant experiment to infuse kyber crystals into living beings, to try to force them to be Force sensitive. And, yeah. And which leads us to the big villain of the game, Dasan, who basically pushes your buttons. He beats you, he gives you a beating after you complete your Artus Prime mission and rescue the colonists, then tells his apprentice, Tavion, to kill Jan, which looks like Tavion does. Then you're so angry and at this guy Dasan that you're like, okay, screw it, I'm going to the Valley of the Jedi, I'm getting my Force powers back. I don't care about what my Force Ghost dad says about responsibility with the Valley of the Jedi. I'm going there to get my Force powers back, then I'm going straight to Yavin 4 and walking right up to Luke Skywalker and demanding my lightsaber back. So that's exactly what you do. But it turns out Dasan followed you to the Valley of the Jedi. Dasan followed you to the Valley of the Jedi after you left, though. So you leave, Dasan arrives at the Valley of the Jedi, then he does something with it. You go up to Luke, demand for your lightsaber, and Luke says, Kyle, you need to learn how to be a Jedi again. So Luke retrains you to be a Jedi and tells you about Dasan's whole origin story. You get your lightsaber back, find out the first hint of where Dasan was headed, which is Relo's place on Nar Shaddaa, so that's where you go. You meet Lando there, who was captured by Relo, so you and Lando take turns fighting Rito, work together to fight Relo's syndicate. Also, it turns out the Remnant took over Cloud City, because they're after something there. So you have to help Lando liberate Cloud City. And there's rumors that Dasan himself is at Cloud City. So you are angry and itching for a fight against Dasan, but it turns out it's not Dasan who's leading the assault on Cloud City. It's Dasan's apprentice, Tavion. You know, the one who killed Jan? Well, after you beat Tavion, you're about to do the same to her when she says, Jan's alive. Basically, this whole thing was an act. We wanted Jan alive so she could lead us to the Valley of the Jedi. Also, we wanted to make it so you thought Jan was dead, just so we could make you angry, and you can lead us directly to the Valley of the Jedi, so we can create our unstoppable Dark Jedi army. Tavion tells you the exact coordinates of their base, which is where you go next. You also team up with Luke Skywalker to fight this unstoppable Dark Jedi army. Then you go aboard a trusted admiral's Star Destroyer. Then you go to Yavin 4 because that's the final level. And that's basically the gist of it. Okay.
Alright, so now can you tell us about the main villain? Dasan shows up here and never again, so this is as good a place as any to talk about him.
Okay. Let's start with the beginning of Dasan. His very beginning. Dasan grew up on a planet where being a Force sensitive is like being a witch. So Dasan grew up with unusual Force powers that made everyone on his home planet hate his guts because he was different. They even shunned and ignored him for having Force abilities. So Dasan spent most of his childhood and adolescence alone because no one wanted to be his friend. They all thought he was different. They all thought he was some sort of evil sorcerer because he was born with the Force. So then a Jedi scout from Luke's new Jedi Academy came and brought Dasan to Yavin 4 because the Jedi scout sensed his potential in the Force. At the Jedi Academy, Dasan felt like he belonged, but then over time, Dasan grew bitter, cold, and angry. He basically criticized his fellow students on Force combat and on Force use and lightsaber combat. He argued violently with his instructors and teachers, and basically Dasan wanted to be the best. After a practice session with a Jedi student, Habit Storm, Dasan killed Storm because Dasan thought he was too weak to be a Jedi, and before the teachers and instructors could counsel Dasan left the Order, and then returned as leader of the Imperial Remnant. So that's how far Dasan was planning to go for basically being rejected in Luke's Jedi Order. Dasan became one of Luke Skywalker's Jedi failures when Luke was managing the Jedi Order. Dasan also had this big, brilliant plan when he took over the Imperial Remnant. Basically gather an army of followers, implant them with kyber crystals, and then lure Kyle Katarn to Artis Prime and Kejim to find out about his plan. Then Dasan would fake kill Jan just to make Kyle Katarn angry enough so that Kyle would go to the Valley of the Jedi and regain his Force powers and lead Dasan and the Imperial Remnant right to the Valley of the Jedi, where he could infuse his followers with Force powers, creating an unstoppable Dark Jedi army called Reborn. Dasan also planned to work on the Shadow Trooper project with Fayar, making Force-using Shadow Troopers. He also took measures on using Cortosis armor for Shadow Troopers, and he took other methods of implanting more kyber crystals, creating more reborn troops. Then the next part of Dasan's big plan is, once he got his army, he would send them all to Yavin 4 and attack Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order. Dasan was at the head of the full-on Force attack on Luke's Jedi Order, and Dasan planned to wipe out all the Jedi and prove that his Dark Jedi army was superior to any Jedi trained in the Force. Basically, artificial army greater than Force-trained army. That is what Dasan believed. He also believed that the weak Jedi who scorned him will soon be erased and replaced by his reborn army. Basically, Dasan is a failed Jedi and a Jedi outcast, which also makes him a formidable opponent for you, because you, as Kyle Katarn, consider yourself a Jedi outcast because of the mess at Droman Kaas. So, in order to defeat a failed Jedi, it's going to take another failed Jedi.
Alright, so I know we're gonna have to talk about her again when we get to Jedi Academy, but how about Tavion?
Well, what we know about Tavion at this point is that she is the Dark Jedi apprentice of Dasan. Dasan personally handpicked Tavion to be his Dark Jedi apprentice when Dasan took over the Imperial Remnant. Tavion follows at Dasan's heel, like his loyal pet, and even went through with Dasan's big master plan. Tavion was the one who fake killed Jan to make Kyle Katarn angry under Dasan's orders. Tavion was also Dasan's second in command in the Imperial Remnant. Tavion also followed Dasan to Yavin 4 when Dasan followed Kyle to Yavin 4. Tavion and Dasan had a front row seat to Dasan infusing his invincible, reborn Dark Jedi army with the Force. Dasan also then afterwards, Dasan sent Tavion to go collect piles of Cortosis from Cloud City. Tavion led the Imperial Remnant takeover of Cloud City. Kyle Katarn met Tavion, and Tavion told Kyle the whole thing. Dasan followed you to the Valley of the Jedi. So, yeah. And now Dasan is infusing his army of reborn warriors with the power of the Force, making them an invincible army of Dark Jedi, all thanks to you. Tavion was defeated by Kyle Katarn, and then revealed Jan was alive aboard Admiral Fayar's Star Destroyer, the Doomgiver, in their base in the Lenico Belt. Why? Because she was not brave enough to die, and she was just as afraid of her master as she was afraid of Kyle. So she decided to leave. We'll see her again in the next game.
Okay, I think we've talked enough about the characters. How about you tell us some stuff about the levels, like Nar Shaddaa, Cairn Reactor, Cairn Docks?
Alright, well, basically, for the first two levels, Artus Prime and Kejim, if you don't know how to aim and fire a blaster, you're screwed. So basically, because Kyle Katarn gave up on the Force and doesn't want anything to do with the Jedi, you spend the first two levels with a blaster. Yeah, with a blaster. I personally find the E11 blaster to be very effective in the times I've played Jedi Outcast, and I love the accuracy of the E11 blaster rifle because it works well in both these levels, even though you get some better blasters down the line. Kejim is the easier blaster level because basically it's a straight walk in and out. Artus Prime is a lot of platforming, and then there are these tunnels with mine crabs, which are nasty, nasty creatures. You either need to rely on instinct or use your electro binoculars to spot the mine crabs. And even then, they're hard to kill because they're so tiny. Nar Shaddaa is one of the hardest levels of the game. Basically, you get your lightsaber, but you don't get much chance to use it because because the entire level's full of snipers and grenaders and anyone with a blaster trying to kill you. Yeah, the grenade throwing weak way are the worst, and they're just as bad as the snipers, who are using disruptor rifles which can disintegrate you on contact. The guys with blasters are just pretty bad, but they're not as bad as the other two. Cloud City is a pretty difficult level, but then again, you're back to fighting the Imperial Remnant after going through a long period of snipers and grenaders and
Grenadiers
and there's Sniper Alley, in which you have to protect an R5 droid and take out the snipers without either you getting killed or the R5 unit getting killed, because the R5 unit's killed, your mission's gone. Your mission's destroyed. If you die, mission's over. So basically, that's the hardest level of Cloud City. Another hardest part of the Cloud City is fighting Tavion. She's pretty difficult. Karen Reactor, basically the hardest part of that. There are a few hard parts in that level, but the hardest one there is when you have to ride a hover pod, but then the hover pod gets shot down by rocket troopers, so you have to use force jump to get to the end platform without being killed by rocket troopers. Yes, they introduced rocket troopers in the Karen Reactor, and they are nasty stuff. There are a few other hard parts of the level. Oh, like for example, the parts where the Karen Reactor has a ton of troopers and officers, and you have to use stealth. And you can't be spotted, because if you are spotted, an Imperial sounds the alarm, you get captured, and then the mission's over. Then there's this one where it's basically an impossible task not to get caught. You enter this one room, and you're immediately spotted and captured. But if you turn the power out in that room, you get a better chance of escaping. Still, any sudden movements that alert the Imperials could get you immediately spotted and captured. So those are the two hardest levels of the Karen Reactor, which is a huge explanation on why the Karen Reactor is one of the nastiest pieces of levels in this game. The Karen Reactor is the hardest level in the entire game because, first, looks simple with the hover platform, but then you get shot down by rocket troopers. Then for the other one, you have to use stealth to escape Imperial notice, because otherwise if you don't, you get spotted, captured, and then it's game over. The Doomgiver doesn't really have many hard levels, except that the Shadow Troopers are pretty hard to deal with because they're wearing Cortosis armor, making them more difficult to kill than regular Reborn troops. Yavin 4... Yavin 4 has a few hard levels at the it has a few hard levels. Oh yeah, there's this one passageway where you have to face down 2 Shadow Troopers, which is pretty hard. One of the hardest pieces of... The other hard piece of the level is using force speed to dodge the fireballs in the depths of the Yavin Temple where you're hunting Dasan. And then there's Dasan, the final boss, who basically gets all angry and rage-filled when you tell Dasan, "Hey, why don't you join us and become a Jedi again?" He's all like, yeah, so Dasan says, "Come, join me, Kyle Katarn. You are always meant to be a Dark Jedi." And Kyle's like, "Why don't you join us, Dasan? Go be a Jedi again." Dasan's like, "You weak fool!" and gets all angry and then charges at you. Dasan is basically impossible to beat unless you do 2 things. One, you can either activate the force thing the force pillar that Dasan was using, and use force speed to get ahead of Dasan. The other thing is you can collapse the entire structure on Dasan, killing him. But to do that, you have to avoid Dasan and slice the pillars. If you can't do either of those, then Dasan is basically impossible to beat. There's a reason why he's the master and Tavion's the apprentice. Yes. The description. Well, Tavion's a human female. Dasan, with tattoos. Dasan is basically a Chistori, which is the Star Wars equivalent of a dinosaur. So, yeah. Dasan. Yeah. So, yeah, Dasan looks pretty cool.
Okay, how about we talk about a few of the enemies, like the Reborn, the Rhodian Snipers, the Artis Prime Mine Crabs.
Okay. Okay, let's see. First enemy you'll face is Stormtroopers and Imperial officers. Be warned, Imperial officers shoot better than Stormtroopers. Stormtroopers have terrible aim in this game, just like they did in A New Hope. The Imperial officers, on the other hand, shoot straight, and you basically have to dodge their shots. Because Imperial officers are more accurate than Stormtroopers. That's for Kedjem. For Artis Prime, we have the same Imperial Stormtroopers, Imperial officers. But this time we have Imperial workers who are basically expert shots like Imperial officers. The Imperial workers are basically regular Imperial work crew that shoot straight and are on point, like Imperial officers. So if you're shooting at Imperial workers, you have to be straight with your shots and have to dodge their shots. Basically, dodge their shots and don't miss. That's my advice for dealing with Imperial officers and Imperial work crew, because they shoot pretty well. The mine crabs, on the other hand, they're small little things that crawl up to you and start nipping at you. They start nipping at you until your health drains, which is not good. So, to beat these guys, you either have to shoot wildly at the ground and hope one of your shots hits them, or use your electro binoculars, spot them, and then start shooting wildly. Basically, don't run out of ammo, because if you run out of ammo, you're screwed against the mine crabs. Also, blaster shots do so much better than a shock stick, because the blaster is more of an insta-kill for the mine crabs. Then again, the mine crabs are only seen in the dark recesses of the tunnels, which are good, but the fact that they are the most difficult enemy to face in the Artis Prime levels are bad. There's even this one scene where where Stormtroopers let out mine crabs and then they attack pretty much everyone on sight, including the Imperials. So for the snipers, basically the snipers are hidden, and they can shoot a long distance. So you're at one part of Nar Shaddaa, they're at another part, they can still kill you. They're hidden, and basically you have to find them first. And first you have to find them, then you have to shoot them. A sniper rifle does more damage than a regular blaster, but a regular blaster is still very effective against the snipers. The lightsaber will unfortunately do nothing against a sniper rifle, especially a disruptor sniper rifle. These guys are hidden, and it's difficult to find them, which could get you killed. See, this is why the snipers on Nar Shaddaa are very tough. The grenadiers are grand. while the snipers may be Rhodian, the grenadiers are Gran. And the Gran Grenadiers throw thermal detonators. Throw thermal detonators, and even if you manage to avoid the thermal detonator, there's still the explosion, which could kill you. These guys are these guys are hard to hit because you could die in the explosion. So the only way to hit these guys is basically to completely avoid the explosion and take these guys out from behind. That's one way how to deal with these guys. There's this one part where they drop grenades directly at you from the next level up, and some of them could even throw grenades a long distance, or even or even if you and the Gran are on a bridge, you could throw the thermal detonator, break the bridge, and you could fall to your death. These guys are very difficult on Nar Shaddaa, and even worse, a pain. Because not only they're hard to kill, which is why you must avoid the explosion, but these guys will easily kill you. The Reborn, basically, you can tell the difficulty of the Reborn by the color robes they're wearing. The orange-robed Reborn are easy, the black-robed Reborn are medium, and the red-robed Reborn are hard. And then there's the hardest Reborn of all, Reborn Shadow Troopers, which wear Cortosis armor and are harder to kill than regular Reborn. So in Cloud City you encounter the orange Reborn, then move up to facing black Reborn. There's this one part you encounter a red Reborn. Oh yeah, also the Stormtroopers now have flechette launchers and Imperial repeaters. So those specialized Stormtroopers are more difficult than the regular ones, but the good news is you can block Imperial repeaters like regular blasters. Bad news is you can't block flechette launchers because they spew out flaming hot debris at you. So those guys are just harder to kill. Then there's Tavion. She's a very difficult enemy, very acrobatic. So she can dodge your attacks. So she can dodge your attacks and then strike you from behind, killing you. Which is why it's important to hit Tavion anywhere you can. Then Tavion will go down. The rocket troopers are a pain because they shoot rockets at you, which cause explosions, which kill you. Even if you're riding in a pod, they can shoot down the pod. If you try to avoid their rockets, one of them will eventually get you, explosion, and then you die. So, rocket troopers are an extreme pain to deal with. We also have Imperial security droids, which you face on Kedjem and Artis Prime. These guys can be killed with a blaster if you use the repetitive fire, and can easily be killed with a lightsaber if you slice it enough times. There's also these droids other Imperial Remnant security droids that shoot you from different angles, and these guys basically have to cut the legs, cut the arms, and then slice it to pieces. These droids are more difficult than the Imperial security droids, which are the floating Destructo balls from Kedjem and Artis Prime. These droids that you face later in the game look like Cortosis armored droids. So these guys, so speaking of mechanized suits, you also deal with AT-STs, which you can take out with a lightsaber, though I recommend using something more effective like a rocket launcher. or another ATST could take out Imperial ATSTs. Admiral Fire has this Cortosis. When you face Admiral Fire aboard the Doomgiver, he has this Cortosis suit that he's wearing, which you basically have to strike a few times when its shields are down, because Fire has shields and has firepower when he's using this suit. So you have to strike it a few times, then the suit, to destroy the suit. When in the Yavin mission, you have Jedi working with you. So that's basically all the enemies of the game. Final note is some actors from the TV show Star Wars Rebels appeared and played characters in this game. Vanessa Marshall, who played Harrison Dula,
Voiced.
Vanessa Marshall, who voiced Harrison Dula, also voices Janors in this game. And Steve Blum, who voiced Garazeb Aurelios from Rebels, voices Admiral Gaelic Fayar. Just something of note.
All right, I think that's good enough for now. Next
time we will be turning the clock back on the Dark Forces series with Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight.
All right, see ya.